Right, oil and filter change on the T120. I don't want to go into intricate detail on everything with this video because although there are one or two differences, it's basically the same procedure as the one that I showed you on Wednesday. But what I want to start off with is emails. I've received 2 or 3 emails over the last few weeks from people who are having problem with emulsified oil in their engines. Now, this can be quite a common problem at this time of the year when the weather's colder, especially if you're not using your bike that much. And what I want to say to everybody is, if this happens to you, don't panic, it's easily sorted out. How do you tell if your oil's emulsified in your engine? It's quite simple really. Have a look through your inspection window. If your engine's it's normal black or brown or red colour, everything's tickety-boo and as it should be. But if it's a milky white colour or it's got globules of some milky white substance floating around in it, it means that your engine oil is either emulsified or is in the early stages of emulsification. Now, this is caused by water getting into the engine. Obviously, oil and water don't mix, so what happens is you get this frothy emulsion that builds up in your engine. Now, in extreme cases, it can cause damage, especially if it's allowed to go unnoticed for a long length of time. So how does the water get in there? All engines, as they get hot, build up pressure in the engine, and that has to be released somehow. So all engines have an engine breather tube. Now, when your engine gets hot, the pressure in the engine builds up and it's expelled through your breather tube. When your engine cools down, the air pressure drops in the engine and it sucks that air back through the breather tube in order to fill the void. In fact, this can even happen if you're not running the bike. It can simply happen through the ambient temperatures fluctuating. Now, obviously, air contains moisture. In winter, if you're not running your bike the normal way, you're just doing short journeys, or that cardinal sin of once a week going to your bike, starting it up, letting it run for 5 minutes, then switching it off thinking you're doing your bike a favour. This is what causes it. In summer, you jump on your bike, you'll go and do 10, 20, 30, 40 miles or more journeys without thinking about it. The engine gets up to full working temperature and it's maintained there for a long time. So any moisture in the engine or in the oil is boiled off and escapes through your engine breather. When you only take short journeys, the engine doesn't reach full working temperature, or it's not maintained at that full working temperature for long enough. So the moisture in that engine remains there, it's not expelled. So if you go through this cycle of short journeys or just starting your engine up, letting it run for a while, then switching it off, the amount of moisture continues to build up in your engine until you literally have a water content which causes emulsification. Now, before we go any further, a word of caution. With liquid cooled engines, it can also be an indication of a problem in that a gasket's gone somewhere and liquid from your liquid cooling system has got into the engine and mixed with the oil. This is very rare, but if in doubt that this could be the case, consult your dealership and get it checked out. Now, getting rid of this problem, if it is just normal emulsification in the manner that I previously described, it's quite easy to get rid of. Just start your bike up and take it for a good run, and I mean 10 or 20 miles. Don't hammer your bike, just ride at a normal pace, 40, 50 miles an hour, no hard acceleration, and at the end of that journey, check your engine oil. What should have happened is that your engine has reached its maximum operating temperature, the water has boiled off, turned into gas or steam, and vented through your engine breather, and your engine oil should have returned back to its normal state. I had a very similar problem with the Project T100 when I got it, 20 miles, and it sorted it out. I've only had this problem a few times in my riding career, but generally speaking, this method works like a charm. There's no point dropping your oil while it's emulsified and putting fresh oil in, because you're not going to get rid of all that moisture, and all you're going to do is create a similar problem with your new engine oil. But once you've got rid of it, for peace of mind, drop your oil and change it. Right, so let's get on with the engine oil and filter change on the T120. Now, once again, as a result of emails that I've received asking my opinion on a particular subject, I thought I'd do something a little bit different with this oil change. It would seem that there's this opinion going around on various forums that if your bike hasn't been run for a while, it's best just to drop the oil straight out of it while it's cold, instead of using the normal method of starting the engine up, letting it run and warm up for a while, and then dropping the engine oil out. The idea being that all the particulate matter that oil's collected during its life is mixed in with the total volume of the oil, so you get a cleaner oil change. But the method behind this other theory is that because the bike's been sat for a long time, all the oil that's collected in the various oil traps on the engine have had ample time to drip down into the sump, so that when you change the oil, you will actually change a larger volume of the oil. More oil will come out than if you use the other method. Now, I can see on the face of it, there's a sort of a method in the madness with this one. And I do understand the thought processes behind it, but people are asking my opinion. I couldn't give an opinion because I've never tried it, so I thought on this occasion, that's what we'll do. The T120 sat there for just over a month. Instead of warming the engine up in the usual manner before dropping the oil out, I just left it as it was and went straight onto the oil change. Now, the drain plug on the T120 is a flush fitting drain plug, and it's situated at the rear of the sump just next to the oil filter. Now, there's something a little bit odd about this drain plug. It appears to be an 8mm Allen socket, and I didn't have an Allen wrench that was suitable for fitting to my torque wrench, so I went out and spent £5, bought a new one. Now, I used this to unfasten the drain plug and start dropping the oil. Absolutely no problem at all. It wasn't until I cleaned it up, ready for refitting and putting the new aluminium washer on it, that I looked at it closely, and although it resembles an 8mm Allen socket at the top, the bit that you can sort of first see, at the bottom of the socket it's shaped like a TX50, and I found this just a little bit puzzling. Now, I tried a TX50 in it and perfect fit. It wasn't until I attempted to torque this drain plug up that I realised there was a problem. I used a TX50, and although the torque setting is only 25 Newton meters, the TX50 bit into the sump plug slightly and jammed. Now, I'm not exactly sure what this socket is that's on here. It might be a special Triumph tool, I don't know. Hopefully someone can tell me. But what it looks like to me is some sort of hybrid socket designed to accept both an 8mm Allen key or a TX50. The only problem is this sump plug is made from soft aluminium, and in my opinion you'd probably be better sticking with the 8mm Allen key. So, in an attempt to try and sort of duplicate the same scenario as I carried out with the T100, I allowed the engine oil to drain from the sump on the T120 for exactly 1 hour before replacing the plug. So far, so good. Now, the oil filter is quite enclosed. It's actually surrounded by part of the sump on 3 sides, so you only have a small area to actually work on it unless you've got one of those cup type wrenches which fits over the top. But even there, I think you are going to be quite limited for space, and some of the thicker ones probably aren't going to fit inside the aperture over the oil filter. Just bear that in mind. Now, a pleasant surprise here, the oil filter had not been over tightened and it moved quite easily. The only problem being that with the tool I had, you had very limited movement, so it was a bit of a war of attrition, about 1/8 of a turn at the time, which took some time to actually get it to the point where I could unscrew it with my fingers, but I got there eventually. It just required a bit of patience. Now, when I actually dropped the oil filter off, there was a problem, but it didn't quite click with me what the problem was at first. When I looked at the mating surface of the oil filter, something looked wrong, but like I say, it didn't click what it was, apart from the fact that it looked like a very crude and cheaply made oil filter. Now, I prepared the replacement new oil filter in exactly the same way as I did with the T100 on Wednesday. I charged it up with fresh oil, just lubricated the O-ring slightly with some of that fresh oil, and then offered it up to the fitting on the bike's sump. But something didn't feel quite right as I was screwing it on. At first I thought maybe I'd cross-threaded it, but a couple of attempts and I soon realised that wasn't the case. Then it occurred to me that the new high flow filter might be faulty, but examination also ruled that out. The thread was tightening up far too quickly and I could feel resistance long before it actually reached the mating surface. And it wasn't until about the fourth aborted attempt that this happened. The sealing ring from the original old Triumph oil filter had come away from the filter and had stuck itself to the bottom of the sump. Now I'd thoroughly cleaned the mating surface at the bottom of the sump ready for the new filter going on with a rag, and I hadn't felt this, bearing in mind that where it is up in that aperture you can't actually see it. Now usually the sealing ring on an oil filter is sealed into the oil filter all the way around, and I've looked at a few YouTube videos where people have been fitting genuine Triumph filters and that's how they used to be. But it looks like Triumph has been penny pinching again, because on the example that I took off the bike it's only actually crimped quite crudely in about 8 places, and obviously on this occasion it hasn't been tight enough to retain it on the oil filter when I've removed the old oil filter. Now I found this quite worrying because it gives instructions in the owner's handbook on how to change the oil. So this is considered to be an owner's maintenance task. And it does strike me that if I hadn't noticed this, this could have caused me a whole world of pain if I'd have just screwed that new filter on and left it at that. You would almost certainly have been looking at probably quite a bad oil leak and a possible engine failure. Now I would not describe this as a premium filter, bearing in mind that it is an original item, and also bearing in mind that Triumph charge around about £14 for one of these. I might just have been unlucky and this is a one-off, but just as a warning, if you're doing your own oil change and you're taking an original Triumph filter off, be vigilant and just make sure that you do get the sealing ring off with the original filter. I for one will be sticking with high flow. Right, so once I'd sorted that out, I attached the high flow filter in the same manner, screwed it in until the two mating surfaces met, and then half a turn to tighten it up. If you want to go by the book, Triumph state 10 Newton meters. So all that was left now was to fill it up with oil and see how much oil it takes, whether or not this theory works and it'll take more than the recommended amount, or whether it works out to be about the same. Right, when it comes to oil, my personal choice is Silkolene fully synthetic ester-based oil. And preempting any comments in the comments section of this video, yes, I agree, it is comparatively quite a bit more expensive than other oils. And that is because, in my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, it is probably just about the best engine oil you can possibly put in your bike. Silkolene was originally an English brand. It's now actually owned by Fuchs, which is a large German company. But the Silkolene brand itself started in 1908, and it concerned itself primarily with motor racing. That's where its origins lie. And whereas other oil companies of the time were content to just keep kicking out the same old products, Silkolene put a lot of research and development into what they were producing. And this culminated in them being approached by the aerospace industry to aid with engine development for aeroplanes. They were involved in the development of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine that was used in the Spitfire. During the 1950s and the 1960s, the US Air Force employed them to develop new oils for jet engine technology. And they were even involved in the Concorde project. In fact, I remember when Silkolene was first offered to the motorcycle market, it had a stylized picture of Concorde on the label. Now this led to Silkolene developing the very first fully synthetic motor oil. And because of changing markets, by the early 1980s they'd moved into the motorcycle sector, recognising that the high-powered, high-revving Japanese motorcycle engines required a better quality oil than was currently being offered. And that's when I started using it, and more or less I've used it ever since. Now, unlike other lubricant manufacturers, Silkolene don't make oil for tractors or any other agricultural vehicle. They don't make oil for cars, and they don't make oil for marine use. They make oils specifically for motorcycles. On top of that, unlike other oil companies, they don't concentrate on volume sales and making their products as competitively priced as possible. They concentrate on quality, hence the additional cost. Now, you feel free to use whatever you like in your bike. It's your money, your choice. But my reasoning is this: why would you spend best part of £10,000 on a motorcycle, probably a few hundred more pounds on noisy exhausts or other accessories for that same motorcycle, probably around about £1,000 to £1,500 on new clothes, helmet, jacket, that kind of thing, and then quibble about £15 or £20 extra per year for a high quality motorcycle oil that protects and preserves your engine? It just doesn't make sense to me. So the Triumph Owner's Manual for the T120 says that the amount of oil required for an oil and filter change on the T120 is 3.4 litres. Now that's a bit less than the T100, but bearing in mind the T100 is an oil-cooled bike, so that extra capacity is probably down to the size of the oil cooler. I followed more or less the same method as with the T100. I put 3 1 litre jugs of oil into the bike. This brought it to the bottom of the low level marking in the window. I then ran the engine for 5 minutes and then left it for the oil to migrate down to the bottom of the engine, refill the inspection window for about 20 to 30 minutes. I then topped it up to the upper level mark, and guess what? It took exactly 3.4 litres. Now think about it, we shouldn't really be surprised, should we? At the end of the day, an oil trap is an oil trap. It traps the oil. Triumph designed and built this engine, and they know exactly what the volume of those oil traps are. And it doesn't matter how long that bike sits there, that oil is going to remain in those oil traps because it's trapped. And the only way you're going to get any extra oil into this bike is to overfill it. Now, if you don't believe me, what I suggest you do is leave your bike for a month or so and try the same experiment yourself. I think you'll find that the results will be more or less the same. And hopefully now that is a myth dispelled and a few questions answered. There's no doubt about it in my mind, the best way to change your oil, especially if you've got dirty oil. In the case of this T120, I knew my oil was clean in the first place, so I didn't mind trying this experiment out. The best way to do it is to warm your engine up, get that dirt mixed up into your oil, and then drop it out in the conventional manner as it says in your handbook. Right, I'm sorry this video's gone on a bit. I do seem to be doing that quite a lot lately. I'll be back next Friday, but I haven't got a clue at the moment what I'll be doing. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video and you found it useful. Please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.